Hello, so today we are on Unit 1, Lesson 2, and that's on factoring trinomials. We've already talked about factoring trinomials where a is equal to 1. Today we're going to factor similar trinomials, but a is not going to equal 1. So again, it's in that form of ax squared plus bx plus c, but this time a is not equal to 1. There's what's called the reverse FOIL method. So let me remind you what the what foiling is. If you have two terms like x plus 2 times x minus 5, what that would look like is it's the first FOIL actually stands for different words here. So F is first, and those two are your first terms there. And then the O stands for outer there. And so those are your outer terms. And then the I is your inner terms. And then L there is your last terms. So it spells FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. So we can do reverse FOIL. So what you do for that is we determine what two terms multiply to give you ax squared, and then what two terms multiply to yield c. Then check the inners and outer terms to see if they equal bx, and then we basically can guess and check because sometimes that doesn't work. So basically a lot of people just refer to reverse FOIL there as guess and check. We also have another one called grouping, so we can write the ax squared term and the c exactly as they are. Then we rewrite the middle term by determining what multiplies to give you ac and adds to give you b. And I'll go through both. If you are going to be going on to trig and or pre-calc 2, we are going to want you to use the guess and check or reverse FOIL method. So let me go ahead here, and we're going to start off here with a couple here, just going to show you how to do grouping on this page, and then we'll go to guess and check from then on. So let's start here with grouping. So we have 5x squared minus 13x plus 6, so I'm going to come over here and make an x. There might be some other method you were taught, and you can totally use that as well. So what multiplies to give us AC? Remember, this goes ax squared plus bx plus c. So your a term there is 5, and your c term there is 6. So we get 30. So what multiplies to give us 30? And then adds to give us our b term here, which is negative 13. Okay, so we want to think what multiplies to give us 30 and adds to give us a negative 13. So what multiplies to give us AC and adds to give us B. So those two are negative 10 and negative 3. Those two are multiplied to give us 30 and add to give us a negative 13. So I'm going to put my x terms in there. X is in there. So I'm going to rewrite this out, and what happens here is you're going to drop down the first term, and you're going to rewrite that middle term. That middle term there is negative 10x and negative 3x. And then you're going to drop down that last term there. All right, so we're going to factor by grouping. So you want to go ahead and figure out the GCF in the first two terms. What do they have in common? They have a 5x in common. You take 5x out of that first term there. 5x times what is a 5x squared? It's an x. 5x times what is a minus 10x? It'd be a minus 2. And then the second set there, you've got a minus 3 there leading. So that minus has to come straight down. You have to bring that down. So what does a minus 3x and a 6 there have in common there? They have a minus 3. So negative 3 times what is an x? Is negative 3x is x. Negative 3 times what is a positive 6? It's a minus 2. So now hopefully you see that they have in common, these two terms have in common an x minus 2. What's left over on the outside? 5x minus 3. And there it is factored. Right. So let's come down here and do the next set. 4x squared plus 27x minus 7. Again, I want to think what multiplies to give me AC. AC there is 4 and negative 7, so 4 times negative 7. And adds to give me the B term. What's my B term there? 27. So what multiplies to give me negative 28 and adds to give me 27? That would be a 28 and negative 1. Right, I'm going to put x's in there. Those are going to become my middle terms. I'm going to bring down the first term. The middle terms there are 28x and a minus 1x. And I'm going to bring down my minus 7. All right, so now let's factor by grouping. What do the first two terms have in common? 4x. 4x times y is a 4x squared and x. 4x times y is 28x, it's 7. The second set over there, what do they have in common? Remember, no matter what, you have to bring down the minus. So they don't share much, but let's just, so they don't, the only thing that goes into them is 1. So if I took out negative 1 times what is a negative 1x would be an x. Negative 1 times what is a negative 7 would be a positive 7. So now what does this term and this term here have in common? They have x plus 7 and x plus 7. So I'm going to take x plus 7 out. So what's left over? 4x minus 1. And there it is factored. That is factoring by grouping. If you're only going to take pre-calc 1, then you can go ahead and you can use this. Use that grouping. Now we're going to do guess and check. So doing that, guess and check here. So I have to think what multiplies to give me 12x squared. Well, what multiplies to give me 12? I'm going to think about 12. 12 and 1, 6 and 2, or 4 and 3. Again, I'm guessing and checking here. I might do this wrong. So 2x and maybe 6x. See if that works. And then over there I have a positive 1 over there. So now I have to think what multiplies to give me a positive 1. The only way I'm getting to get that is 1 and 1, but notice the middle term there has to be negative, so it has to be a negative 1 and a negative 1. So now check the inners and outers. Negative 6x. Negative 2x. They do indeed add to give me my negative 8x, which is my middle term. So it has to add those inners and outers here. When you take that negative 6x and you add that negative 2x, they have to add to give you that middle term there of a negative 8x. This one takes some practice, but once you get it, it's going to be a lot faster. So my next one here, what multiplies to give me a 5x squared? Well, to get 5, you only have one choice. You just have 5 and 1. So this has to be a 5x and a 1x or just an x. How do I get 12? Well, 12 and 1, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. All right, so let's try one of those. But let's think about our signs here. It has to have, it has to be our signs there. It has to be a negative 12. The middle term there is positive, so to get a middle term of positive, your higher number of your pair there has to be the bigger number. So the bigger number there is 12. The next pair, the bigger number is 6. Next pair, the bigger number there is 4. So we have to put those in here. So let's try 3 and negative 4. Let's just try that. So I don't know, 3 and negative 4. So if I do that, check my inners and outers. This gives me a 3x. This gives me a negative 20x. When I add those together, I get a negative 17x. That does not work. I could switch them around. Check my inners and outers. Add them together. I get 11x. That doesn't work. Whoops. All right, so now looking at this one here, we already tried that 4 and 3 one. That did not work. So now we're going to try this 6 and this negative 2. (6x) minus 10x. Oh, that's a negative 4x. That's not right. So let's switch them. Check my inners and outers. Oh yeah, 30x plus a negative 2x is going to indeed give me my 28x. So that does work. So x plus 6 and 5x minus 2 works. All right, so I'm going to keep going here with the guess and check here. What times what gives me a 2x squared? Well, to get 2, I only have a 2 and a 1. What about 40? Well, if I start to list 40s out. All right, so since there's a negative 40 there, one has to be positive, one has to be a negative. The higher number, the pair has to be a negative since the inside there is a negative. So looking at those, we can't think in terms of 11 because we don't have just a 1x and a 1x. We have a 2x and an x. So we're going to have to guess and check. Just like we said, we have to guess and check these. So let's try it. So I'm going to guess the 5 and the negative 8 there. So I'm going to put a plus 5 and a minus 8 here and check the inners and outers. 5x plus a negative 16x does give me a negative 11x. So that works. All right, let's try another one. 3x squared minus 13x minus 10. So again, how do you get 3? Oh yeah, just 3 and 1, so it has to be 3x and x. How do I get 10? 10 and 1 and 5 and 2. but it's a negative 10. So it's a negative 10, so one's a negative, one's a positive. The higher number there has to be, the other pair has to be the negative because you got a negative on the for your B term. So let's put them in there. So I usually start off with the non-ones. So I usually start off with like that 5 and that 2 there. So I'm going to put in my minus 5 and my plus 2. Check those. Negative 5x and 6x. No, that gives me a 1x. So I'm going to swap them. Does that work? Got 2x and then negative 15x. Yes, that adds to give me negative 13x. 2x plus a negative 15x does give me a negative 13x. So there it is factored. So I want you to work on these problems here, numbers 1 through 18. Try those out and see if you can do those. So if you can pause the video here and then I'll go through them. All right, so factoring these, here we go. What times what gives me 2x squared? 2x and x. What times what gives me a negative 15? It's a positive 5 and a negative 3. If you check your inners and outers here, you've got 5x minus 6x. Does indeed add to give me my negative 1x. So that does work. So there we have it. 2x plus 5 and x minus 3. Let's try another one over here. What multiplies to give us a 4x squared? It's 4x and x. What multiplies to give us a negative 6? This is a positive 1 and a minus 6. You checked your inners and outers here. A 1x minus a 24x would indeed give us a negative 23x. All right, so 3x squared plus 22x plus 24. What times what gives you 3x squared? That's 3x and x. What multiplies to give you 24? That's 4 and 6. Check your inners and outers. 4x plus 18x does indeed give us a 22x. All right, let's try another one here. What times what gives us 5x squared? 5x and x. What multiplies to give us 12? It ended up being a positive 6 and a negative 2. If you checked your inners and outers, 6x minus 10x there does indeed give us our negative 4x. So that does work. The fifth one here, what times what gives you a 2x squared? 2x and x. What multiplies to give us there negative 20? That would be a negative 5 and a positive 4. If you were to check your inners and outers there, you've got negative 5x and an 8x. And that does indeed add to give us a 3x. All right, looking there at number 6 there, what times what gives you a 6x squared? It'd be a 3x and a 2x. What multiplies to give us a negative 4? That would be a negative 4 and a 1. Check your inners and outers. Negative 8x plus 3x does indeed add to give us our middle term there of negative 5x. All right. Next one here does not have your first term, your a value there is equal to 1, so you could think what times what gives you x squared, so that's x and x. And that what multiplies to give you 1,722 negative, and add to give you a negative 1, it's a negative 42 and a positive 41. Those two numbers have to be one apart from one another because you have to add to give you a negative 1 there in the middle. So number 8 there, x and x, again, a is here is equal to 1. What multiplies to give us 506 and adds to give us a positive 1. One's a negative, one's a positive, and they have to be one apart. So I would just take my 506 and start dividing it out. 506 divided by 10, then try 15 and see how close the numbers are. They have to be one apart from each other. So it ends up being 23 and 22. So coming over here, looking at this next one here, 650. When I'm doing this one here, x and x here, sometimes it helps to kind of figure out what these two numbers here are if you were to go ahead here and take the square root of that number. That might help you out a little bit better here. So if you take the square root of 650 there, that might give you a better idea of how to do those. But I'm going to stop there for now. Let's go on to the next ones here. So we've got some GCF problems here to do. So let's pull the GCF out of that. So when I'm looking at one like this, I think 6x, 2x, and 20 there, what do they all have in common? You can divide this whole thing here by 2. So if I take a 2 out of here, I'm here left with 3x squared. Divide each of these terms, 6x divided by 2 here gives me a 3x. 2x divided by 2 here gives me a minus x. 20 divided by 2 there gives me a minus 10. And then I have to keep factoring this as much as I can. So the 2 stays here on the outside. What times what gives me a 3x squared? It'd be an x and a 3x. What multiplies to give me a negative 10? 2 and 5 probably. And I'm going to guess negative 2 and positive 5. Check those inners and outers. Negative 6x plus 5x does indeed give me the negative 1x. So that works. Your whole answer is there, even with that whole number 2 on the outside. All right, the part B there. Again, you want to figure out what these 3 numbers here are divisible by. And they're all divisible here by 2. So let's pull the 2 out. Taking 4x squared and dividing that by 2 here, taking each term and dividing by 2 there, we end up getting a 2x squared. 26x divided by 2 there is 13x. 30 divided by 2 there is 15. I'm going to keep factoring. What times what is a 2x squared? It'd be x and 2x. What multiplies to give me 15 there? So remember, I've got 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. So maybe I'll write those down here. I'm going to go with the 3 and 5 and try that out and see if that works. So checking the inners and outers there. (10x plus 3x doesn't give me the middle term there of 13x. So that does work. And then the area problem here. The area of a rectangle lot is 6x squared plus 17x plus 5. The width is 2x plus 5. What's the length? So if you remember a rectangle here, area is equal to, this is your length and this is your width. So area is length times width. So our area there told us it was 6x squared plus 17x plus 5. We're told that the width there is 2x plus 5, and we don't know the length there. So it's kind of nice because they started off here for us, so we can just put them in here. So we can think, how do I get 6x squared? 2x times what is 6x squared? It'd be a 3x. And then I can just think about this one here. How do I get 5? 5 times what gives me that 5? It'd be a 1. So then that would be my length. If that's confusing to you, you could also do it this way. Just go ahead and factor it yourself. Forget that they even gave you the width if you like that. You can think what times what gives you 6x squared, and so you know it has to be a 1 and 6 or a 2 and a 3. And again, I like to start off with a non-1 there, so I'm going to start off with 2 and 3. And then what times what is 5 over here? Well, it has to be a 5 there, would have to be a 5 and a 1. So I'm going to guess a 5 and a 1 in that order. Check the inners and outers. Do they add to give you your 17x? Yes, they do. So that does work. So again, answering the question there, it says what's the length? The length there is 3x plus 1. So whichever way you want to do it, they gave you part of the answer and you can just work it through, or you can just completely factor it on your own without using the given one. So we factored trinomers where a is not equal to 1.